Yeah, we finally found the camera. Welcome aboard. From now on, you'll be joining us floating around space trying to accomplish Project Nostalgia-tards. Don't worry too much about it, it's just a framing device, alright? So if you're just joining us and didn't watch our last video, we had a largely positive opinion on Crash Bandicoot. I won't go into detail, you need to watch that. Matter of fact, watch our other video covering the two GBA games as well. Now, despite what can be said, those games were technically spin-offs. We had to eventually return to our larger mainline game. 1 year after Nitro Kart in 2004, the next major console Crash platforming game finally drops. This is Twinsanity. This kicks off a very experimental period in the franchise's history and hosts some of the most divisive games in the series, Twinsanity being chief among them. To be fair, I don't know what the consensus is nowadays, but when I was a kid, Twinsanity was a very loved or hated entry, and a lot of people hated on it. I mean, not without reason, there are a ton of issues with this one, both from a gameplay and developmental standpoint, and we'll cover all of this as we go through the game together. But before you make a decision on whether you like the game or not, allow me to get ahead a bit and offer a rebuttal. They gave Crash fairly detailed butt textures. This was a deliberate design decision. Huh, furries? Does this do anything for you? Gooners? Huh? Okay, play the intro.
In Crash Twinsanity, a strange twist of fate has forced Crash and the evil Dr. Cortex to team up.
And there's some sweet moves in this game, like twin spin, twin throw.
Allow us to demonstrate.
Take control of an orange daredevil and evil genius using bone-crushing team moves. Just because they're working together doesn't mean they gotta like it. Crash Twinsanity, rated E for everyone.
Around late 2002 or early 2003, the Crash franchise was, and still is at the point of this retrospective, in a very transitional period. Although the games that came out after the Naughty Dog era still sold well enough, the last mainline entry, the Wrath of Cortex, sold well over 5 million copies despite receiving mixed reviews for its lack of innovation. The games were still being pumped out, while arguably the series was seen on being on a decline in terms of critical reception. Speaking of lacking innovation, another issue that we hinted a little at during the C&K video was that the games themselves weren't exactly doing anything new. If they weren't playing almost exactly like what came before, they were taking other elements such as visuals and music from those bygone days in an attempt to cheaply convince people that these were indeed Crash games, instead of coming up with something fresh. Slap on a massive shift in quality, and it's needless to say that there had to be a good amount of franchise fatigue going around. In comes a returning Traveler's Tales Oxford, who was given a task to steer the franchise back on track. I kinda guess that line of logic tracks. Putting how I feel about the Wrath of Cortex aside, it was the most successful entry the series has seen up to that point since the Naughty Dog titles. A lot of that was because it was one of those lots of firsts for the series games, which I'm sure helped a lot, but still, success is success. It's not like Vivendi Universal cared about the quality of the game or anything, they just went where the money was made, so our old friends at Double T got a second shot at a Crash game. A ton of issues with the Wrath of Cortex came from the developers having to restart development due to a handful of hangups, seemingly mostly from internal drama. That left them with little time to jam a whole game together. And as if some sick joke, pretty much the same thing happened here. This time, it didn't come from some kind of in-house drama, at least to my knowledge, but instead pure coincidence. The first incarnation of what would become Twinsanity wasn't Twinsanity at all. It was called Crash Bandicoot Evolution. The premise was wild in a more serious sci-fi kind of way. The evil twins literally ripped Crash's home island off Earth and glued it into some kind of Frankenstein planet made of other worlds. It was meant to be edgy and a little bit darker. Think Crash in a big sprawling planet with heavier physics and maybe RPG-ish mechanics, which was a pretty big departure from the run, jump, spin, crate formula. Sounds cool, right? Until it wasn't. Another game came out in 2002 called Ratchet & Clank that basically nailed the exact galaxy mesh premise. Villains stitching worlds together, big open levels, sci-fi vibes. Traveler's Tales realized they were about to look like Crash was copying Ratchet instead of doing his own thing, so Evolution got scrapped. So now they had to make a Crash game that wasn't too much like Ratchet & Clank, and they maybe had less time than they originally thought. With the remaining time that they did have, Traveler's Tales decided to pivot with a renewed focus on comedy, chaos, and Crash being himself. Goofy, self-aware, and self-aware about being goofy. The idea shifted from a serious solo hero to Crash and Cortex reluctantly teaming up against a bigger villain threat. This buddy cop vibe, Crash carrying Cortex, using him as a weapon, and being forced to cooperate in levels became part of the actual gameplay and not just story. Now with a clear direction in mind and development restarted, this new game needed a catchy name. There were several working subtitles during this phase: Unlimited, Fully Flex, Twinsane, and in a legendary last-minute naming moment, Vivendi Universal literally gave the devs 1 hour to pick a title before it defaulted into Unlimited. Concept artist Keith Webb scribbled out Crash Twinsanity in about 5 minutes, and boom, it stuck. This is where this game becomes something of the opposite of Wrath of Cortex, where that game went into development with larger ideas and had to downsize due to time constraints. The newly dubbed Twinsanity's premise created so much ideas that the devs wanted to focus on, but once again had to downsize due to time constraints. The game was still way bigger in concept than what was actually shipped. There's a ton of evidence, prototypes, concept art, scrap levels, characters, showing the game was originally a much wilder beast. And this cut content wasn't just stuff left on the cutting room floor, it was major pieces of the game's DNA that lingered as hints in the final product. What's funny is that, to my understanding, Twinsanity overall had more development time compared to some of the other Crash games up to this point. It just suffered from the classic developer's fate: ambition plus limited time plus too many ideas. The sheer volume of stuff the team wanted to do, open hubs, Cortex cooperation, multiple playable characters, bigger world interconnectivity, backfired and left parts unfinished or half realized. So yeah, while many fans will say the game feels rushed, it's not because the devs weren't trying. It's just they tried to shove a whole Crash symphony into what realistically should have been a 2-disc PS2 or Xbox game, and trimmed it down to something more manageable. The result was missing levels, odd story seams, weird pacing, and unused models, but also a ton of ambition.
Crash Twinsanity at the time served as Crash Bandicoot 5, since it takes place straight after Cortex and Uka Uka are left stranded on an iceberg somewhere in the Antarctic. Despite that fact, instead of just sitting there trying to shoot him for 3 years, Uka could have simply flew away. But hey, I'm not a pissed off evil mask, so maybe I'm overstepping my boundaries. This title is a completely different beast than a typical Crash game. Outside of the hook of Crash and Cortex spanking each other, the developers decided to shake things up a bit by doing away with the stage-to-stage progression formula, and instead allowing players to explore several fairly large hub areas, transforming a simple platformer into a more open-ended adventure. Individual set pieces are used to link areas together and ferry players along. Obviously, this is a huge departure from the norm, and whether or not this particular approach to a Crash game was successful is entirely up to opinion, of course, but it's clearly something we're looking to answer by the end of the video. This idea alone split the fan base right down the middle. Some people absolutely loved it just as much as some others hated it, but at this point of the series, I'd rather have this than another unoriginal title that bored me to tears. Another massive change to the game is opening with cold-blooded murder. Alright, not really. The game opens with Coco, who apparently decided to retire her role as a serious creepy sex icon to instead chase some butterflies, when she's suddenly stunned by Cortex. We then meet Crash, who was off doing his own thing digging for some lost sneakers, when Cortex, clearly dressed to replace Coco as the series' new creepy sex icon, calls Crash over to follow him into the bay. I mean, I get the wig, that's not even close to Coco's hairstyle, but did he just have her outfit lying around? Or did he strip that poor girl for her clothes? Man, he just got back into the scene and Cortex is already breaking some major laws. Dude's an animal. From this point, the game expects you to follow Cortex, but you're pretty much free to explore the beach area for as long as you want. Not only does this serve as a good excuse to let players get used to the controls, but it also informs them that if they choose to wander around, there's things to be found. But there isn't tons of collectibles in Twinsanity. It's mostly just the standard Wampa fruit and extra life boxes, and grabbing them will net you tons of lives pretty quickly, so I'm not saying there isn't any incentive to explore. It's just that those are the only things you'll really be scooping up. There is one more collectible in the form of gems. which in a normal Crash game would be typically tied to breaking all the boxes or in different routes. But since there's no box total in this game, they've been scattered across the map to be collected. Sometimes they'll be out in the open or slightly out of the way, requiring a little more finesse, but most of the time they'll be awarded after completing these mini challenges. These challenges vary from platforming to messing around with the physics or sacrificing a couple of chickens, and although they only unlock concept art and whatnot, they're fun enough to go for if you want to break up the gameplay real quick. And I gotta tell you, finally getting to freely explore Insanity Island for the first time is pretty fucking cool. It might be because we've been going through the series with these retrospectives, but it's hidden different. With that being said, let's go back to the topic of collectibles real quick. I don't want to completely diminish the concept of roaming around these hubs. Some of the best parts of the game can be found tucked away from the paths the game wants you to go down. Of course, there are annoying parts found here as well, usually when it involves having to deal with the game's physics. But for me, that was few and far between, and I usually found myself having fun overall. But let's get back on track with the story. Crash follows Cortex in what honestly has to be one of the most entertaining tutorial sections I've ever played. It's pretty funny how Cortex is the one teaching Crash all these basic necessities of Bandicoot survival, but I suppose he lost enough time to these simple moves to be qualified.
Are you? It's true. Blondes do have more fun.
Yeah, by this point you should have the moves figured out, but if the game's going to drag the player through such rudimentary stuff, you can at least make a joke out of it. And Twinsanity's humor doesn't stop there. Like what was said in the section before, the devs aim for this to be a funny game in general, and even after playing this janky beauty for about 20 years now, I say most of the jokes still land, especially when they're being self-deprecating or poking fun at typical platforming tropes.
Hey! Yeah, you! I've been doing this for 10 stinking years. Back and forward, and I'm sick of it! Well, I'm not gonna do it no more!
This abruptly and almost kind of shockingly brings us to our first boss fight. But against who? Cortex? What are you doing here? I guess that really doesn't work when I've been calling him by his name the entire way up here, huh? Anyway, surprising no one, Cortex is a little pissed off after spending 3 years frozen, and he's planning the way to finally get rid of Crash. We've even got cameos for most of the bosses from previous games, including a backstabbing Polar for some reason, and I was always a player guy anyway, punk ass bear. Don't get too attached to them though, this lineup doesn't really do much outside of appearing here, with the exception of Dango Dial, who gets a boss fight later on. Speaking of boss fights, for once, Cortex is the first boss in the game, and it's a relatively solid opening fight, receiving a second phase as Engine tags in for Giant Mecha Bandicoot, and even though the attacks aren't hard to dodge or anything, I did take some damage, so I guess I can still call this the best Cortex and I guess Engine boss fight in the series. Although, what was the point of luring Crash there at all? If you wanted Crash dead, then why didn't Cortex do it when he had the complete element of surprise? He stunned Coco. Crash wasn't even bothering with anything till you called him over, and while he's friendly, I don't think Crunch had joined the family yet, judging from the fact that he doesn't seem to live there. I also have no idea where Aku Aku is. Probably getting fucked in the ass.
The resultant explosion hit Cortex's board, causing it to malfunction as it flies uncontrollably towards Crash, knocking them both into the caverns below. This kicks off the next level, where we get to play as Cortex. Kinda. Traveler's Tales and their infinite wisdom brought back everyone's favorite bit from the Wrath of Cortex, where you get to play as a ball, except this time it's made out of guys. To be fair, this area is way better designed than anything found in that game. You have way more control over the ball itself, so you're not constantly flinging yourself off platforms trying to stop. There's plenty of room to build up speed and still provide obstacles to keep you honest, and most of the challenges are actually interesting to interact with instead of just having you sit there and wait. But if you are waiting for whatever reason, there's plenty of choking and spanking to keep you occupied till then. Huh, furries? Does this do anything for you? Gooners? Huh? And let's move on. Crash and Cortex fight their way through a network of ramps, lifts, and explosives until they eventually break up, with Cortex finding a power crystal. This leads to a brief combat section where Crash has to fend off infinitely spawning enemies while belly flopping on these buttons that somehow causes the drill ship thing's doors to close.
Yes, the crystal is mine. Ah! Keep back, you weak-minded fool! Avert your gaze or you'll go crystal crazy!
After all that, the third gameplay style is introduced, where Crash drags Cortex around while he's trying to hold on to the power crystal. You have to work around Cortex without the ability to double jump, but you can also use his huge head to smash things, and with him holding on to the power crystal, it effectively doubles the range of Crash's spin. You can also throw him across the map to attack enemies or interact with certain environmental elements. This is one of the few gameplay styles that actually come back more than once in Twinsanity, and I suppose it's fine. You have to put a little more thought into Crash's normal running and jumping with Cortex hanging around, while also looking out for areas you can throw him to continue progression. Speaking of throwing, you don't have to worry about tossing Cortex off ledges and the like to his supposed death, as he'll just teleport right back next to you. The same goes for if he's thrown into areas with nothing for him to interact with. He'll just look around for a bit and return to you after a couple of seconds. This keeps the pace tight while still allowing players to freely experiment with Cortex. Not in that way. What's the point of breaking a life box if the fucking thing is just gonna float there teasing me? Believe it or not, we've only been through the first 2 levels of Twinsanity, and it's already taken us through basic platforming, a boss fight, a Wrath of Cortex style Atlas Spirit section, I guess they're called roller brawls, whatever, and the segment that tasks you to navigate both characters at the same time. And that was only like, what, the first 20-30 minutes into the game? Well, get used to it, because this is just kind of what Twinsanity is like. The pace is extremely fast. This is both a strength and a weakness. It's a strength because there's never truly a dull moment throughout the game's runtime, but at the same time, thanks to the breakneck pacing, gameplay ideas are thrown at you non-stop. That means you're never bored at the very least, however, you also never really get a chance to let anything truly set in. So if you find yourself enjoying a particular gameplay style, and it isn't one of the 2 that typically come back, then you're shot out of luck unless you restart the game from the very beginning. That is, unless the game doesn't properly block off a section and just let you trigger the same events again, which isn't a replay function, it's a glitch. I don't know if you guys ever knew about this little Easter egg with the game's box, but if you zoom in right below the logo of the game, you can barely make out the true title, which is called Crash and the Casual Fucking Glitches. Personally though, I think the game does a good job balancing all these things out, but I wouldn't exactly argue with someone who hates how the gameplay is formatted.
Outside the caverns, we finally get a reason why this game is called Twinsanity, which comes from these 2 guys who call themselves the evil twins. Yeah, I can understand the assumption that the title comes from Crash and Cortex going through a ton of different gameplay styles, and the fact that there are 2 of them, but no. The main antagonists are what actually put the twin in Twinsanity, or guess more specifically where they're from, but we're not there yet. As fellow twins ourselves, we're also used to going by a team name of sorts. They're the evil twins, we're the big ends. I like to think ours have a bit more identity behind it. The twins introduce themselves and make their intention of destroying Insanity Island very clear. When Cortex brushes off their little threat, one of the twins shows off their power by pulling Cortex's brain right out of his head, and he runs off with it. And of course, like most poorly written bad guys with an ill-defined power set, they never show this level of control over a living thing again. And just like that, they're gone. They do show up here and there, but they don't factor into much outside of giving our heroes something to do. I don't dislike them, but they aren't my favorite either. Crash makes his way to catch up with Cortex, but hits a slight bump when I lose a couple of lives due to what feels like a roof being too low to make a jump correctly. After about 3 or 4 attempts, we do catch up with the doctor, who seems suddenly much better, and immediately starts begging Crash for help to stop the evil twins. And while he's busy questioning his life decisions, it leads to yet another gameplay switch up.
You have to help me, Crash. You heard them. They want to destroy our island home, humiliate and enslave you, and steal my brain. How I envy the simple life of the tribesfolk. Living in harmony with Mother Nature, the noble boar, the humble bumblebee.
This time we're tasked with platforming ahead of Cortex, keeping him safe from obstacles and the like while he runs, and he's not stopping for anything, so you have to stay on top of it. Well, not that quick. You can get a good distance ahead and clear a path in advance, but these sections have moments where you're forced to wait for Cortex to pass safely, either by creating a path for him or timing the switch to move stuff into place so he can cross. There are also pressure lock gates that require you to either hold them open for Cortex or to wait for him to run past, allowing you to proceed. These are some of the more entertaining parts of the game, mostly because they still focus on the core platforming. They're good. Cortex is captured by a local sea-terror boss fight, Apu Apu, and as it shouldn't be a shock to anyone by this point, we're thrown into yet another gameplay style. This time it's stealth, and it isn't even that big of a change-up. You're still doing the standard platforming, just occasionally ducking behind bushes to make sure the tribesmen don't see you with their binoculars? Looks like the white man visited Insanity Island at some point, huh? Once you're done avoiding the guards, Crash makes it into the village and notices Cortex tied up to a massive totem pole. He platforms his way up there to help him, but their combined weight breaks the pole, sending Cortex drifting down the river. Instead of Apu taking Crash on personally, he sends his warriors after him, resulting in a cute little nostalgic chase section. They run into the evil twins again, and despite this being the only second time encountering them, Crash and Cortex already seen and heard enough. We do learn that they're from the 10th dimension though. We bring a statue of a totem god to life to deal with the two of them. The totem god is a pretty uneventful boss. You just run in circles until you get the chance to slide Cortex down his throat so he could do some damage from the inside, while Crash fight the minions on the outside. With the twins defeated, somehow, they return to the 10th dimension. They mention something about sucking the goodness out of their world and only leaving the bad, but it literally never comes up again. So they're evil just for the sake of being evil. Kinda, we're not there yet. At any rate, the two decide to form a temporary alliance, and they begin making their way to Cortex's laboratory.
Did you know? Twinsanity had a very short development cycle, roughly 12 months, which explains its numerous bugs, glitches, and large amount of cut content.
Did you know? Early concepts suggest that multiple endings were planned depending on item collection and choices made, but only one ending made it into the final game.
Did you know several entire worlds were planned but never finished, including the expanded Academy of Evil, extra iceberg lab areas, and more evil twins locations?
Did you know? Dr. Cortex comment constantly on players' actions, environmental hazards, and story events, giving the game far more reactive dialogue than earlier entries.
Did you know that Crash Twinsanity was the only game officially developed and released by Traveler's Tale Oxford Studio? Oxford was a subdivision of Traveler's Tales that was put together to create nothing but Crash Bandicoot titles. Due to the poor sales of Twinsanity, Oxford Studio was shut down, and all future projects were passed on to other developers. I'm no expert on islands or weather, but there has to be something really wrong with your environment if an entire frozen landscape is just a casual boat ride away from the tropical one. Unless that ride was a lot longer in universe. I hope that's the case, because the evil twins are the least of your problems if it isn't.
Before you rises a cathedral of diabolical genius. Scary, but in the wrong hands, this iceberg lair could do much goodness in the world. Of course, only I have the key. Observe. Follow me! I know another way.
The path to Cortex's laboratory opens up the game once again to another hub area, with multiple branching paths and plenty of fun optional routes to snag some gems. But even outside the extra stuff, the main path itself has some great platforming as Crash makes his way up the iceberg, which leads to what is, in my opinion, the best joke of the entire game.
The check bounced. Are you sure? Well, the past few years have kind of been slow. Wrath of Cortex didn't do as well as we'd hoped, and... Fish?
Great joke aside, the ice climb section, simple as it is a highlight of the game. All the platforming challenges you'll encounter here, whether on the beaten path or not, feel like natural extensions of what you learned back on Insanity Island, just more dangerous. There are more bottomless pits, more moving platforms, and more hazardous obstacles blocking your path, all while enemies are tossed in to make dealing with everything just a little more annoying. And sweet baby Jesus on a lifeboat, that music is godly. But now, since I've broken that seal, let's talk about what is unquestionably Twinsanity's most defining trait: the music. The entire soundtrack was composed by an a cappella group that went by the name of Spiral Mouth. For those who don't know, a cappella means that every piece of music you hear in this game is performed entirely with people's mouth. No instruments involved. Nobody here is banging on the trash can. And for us here on Nostalgia-tards, the fact that the soundtrack is made purely of spit and air means that this game has some of the most unique and standout music we've ever heard in a video game. More importantly, the music does a ton of the heavy lifting and giving Twinsanity a sense of personality that the series hadn't really achieved since the Naughty Dog era. After Naughty Dog, Crash games struggled with identity, often feeling like they were chasing what came before rather than defining something new. Twinsanity, for all its faults, doesn't have that problem, and a huge reason why is the soundtrack. It doesn't sound like Crash 1-3, it doesn't sound like Wrath of Cortex, it sounds like Twinsanity, and only Twinsanity. Well, Tag Team Racing too, but we're not there yet, come on. The a cappella approach also reinforces the game's comedic timing. Stingers, vocal accents, and rhythmic breaks often land right alongside visual gags or absurd character moments, especially during Cortex-heavy sections. The music isn't afraid to be goofy, awkward, or intentionally irritating at times, and that willingness to fully commit is what makes it work. It feels closer to a weird cartoon score than a traditional video game soundtrack, which fits Twinsanity's more overly comedic writing perfectly. Is the soundtrack universally pleasant? Not always. Some tracks are chaotic, repetitive, or even borderline grating if you listen to them in isolation. But in context, that's kind of the point. The music embraces the same lack of restraint that defines the rest of the game. It's memorable because it's bold, not because it's safe. And in a game that often feels unfinished or uneven, the music is the glue that holds everything together. It gives Twinsanity its identity, its attitude, and its weird, slightly unhinged charm. Love the game or not, its soundtrack is doing something genuinely different, and that alone earns it a spot as one of the most distinctive scores in video game history. The section then caps off with a pretty decent boss fight against Uka Uka, marking his first appearance as a boss fight in the series. It isn't anything special or particularly difficult as a fight, just dodge snowballs and track in lots of ice until you get an opening to throw Cortex at a switch, something the level has already introduced and taught to you by this point. That opens up a button you can press which then burns Uka Uka's ice golem form. I mean, I don't really get how burning ice causes it to fade instead of melt, but still, this is a pretty solid boss fight all around. Uka Uka starts to run off like a bitch when his brother stops him. Wait, have we mentioned Aku Aku yet? Yeah, he's in the game. He isn't worth much since his lazy ass can't even protect you from nitro crates, but he is indeed a thing in this game. He updates his brother on current events and they decide to team up in order to stop this new threat of undefined power. Well, I guess the masks have ill-defined abilities too, despite how much downplaying Aku Aku does.
Divided, we are but two magical masks.
Yeah, okay, just two magical masks. Like in this world, that's a totally low power level thing to be. Anyway, they go off and Crash and Cortex makes their way to his lab. As soon as they arrive, the evil twins show up, instantly defeating the brothers. One of the twins lets slip that they hold tons of treasure in the 10th dimension, which gets Cortex's attention. They also mention that Cortex is responsible for ruining their lives, before leaving a couple of waves of easy enemies to defeat.
Aku Aku suggests since the twins have a grudge against Cortex, maybe giving him to them might spare the island.
I've ruined the lives of so many. I can't be expected to remember them all.
Such a big head! Such a tiny brain!
But Cortex quickly shifts the subject to solidify his partnership with Crash as they make their way deeper into his lab. Cortex plans involve them using his dimension traveling machine to go to the 10th dimension, deal with the twins directly while also still on their swag. But they'll need the power crystals to make the jump, of which there are low. The two make their way out to the balcony where Cortex explained the plan. They need to reach Engine's battleship to steal the power crystal they're missing. There's just one problem. They don't actually have a way down to the beach where the ship is docked. That's when an old itch comes back to Crash. An urge, a dark chapter in his past. Something he did to smaller creatures that once got him in serious trouble. He did time for it. He thought he changed for the better, but the sickness resurfaces. Crash likes him, Crash wants him, and now he can do this the easy way or the hard way. Oh, you just want to use Cortex as a makeshift snowboard. Never mind. This level has Crash spinning down a mountain on Cortex's face as they jump over cliffs, avoid mines, gears, electric gates, and occasionally grinding away at Cortex's gooch until he's nothing but balls and ass down there. We also shred into a couple of the Doctor's side hustles, including some kind of butchery which transitions into a bass boosted chase section, and then straight into another business venture that seems to be a brothel, that either his mother is working there or visiting, I don't want to know. Before the section ends, the two start brawling while rolling downhill, creating a huge snowball that destroys Dango Dial home. Outhouse? Why would he be taking a smash with a huge flamethrower strapped to his back? At any rate, he overheard Cortex mentioning the idea of treasure. With the Cortex sliding out of the way, we head off the Engine's battleship to look for crystals.
Oh! Holy crap, Engine, what happened to you? Oh yeah, this is a Vicarious Vision, so now we're back to shitty looking Engine. Although to be fair, he does look a lot better than what he did in Wrath of Cortex. And with that said, I suppose let's talk about the graphics of Twinsanity real quick. Crash Twinsanity's graphics represent a clear shift towards scale and openness, moving away from the tightly controlled optical-driven design of earlier Crash games. The environments are larger and more continuous, giving the impression of a connected world rather than a series of isolated levels. The game makes strong use of exaggerated scale, with wide sight lines and oversized structures that help locations feel expansive. This works especially well outdoors, where distances and verticality adds a sense of place and momentum. Characters are relatively small to their surroundings, reinforcing the idea that Crash is navigating spaces bigger than he is. Character models favor expressiveness over consistency. Animations are exaggerated and flexible, prioritizing personality rather than realism. While this can result in uneven visuals, it fits the game's cartoon-driven presentation. Visual polish is inconsistent across environments. Some areas show clear artistic intent through color and layout, while others suffer from flat textures and underdeveloped lighting. Take the area we just went through, the ice climb. This is Twinsanity at its strongest visually in my opinion. The wide open snowfields, strong contrast between wide environments and dark machinery, and long sight lines all play perfectly into the game's sense of skill. It actually feels like you're barreling through a real place instead of a boxed in level. The simplicity helps hide texture issues and the environment comes across clearly. Skipping ahead a little bit, the Academy of Evil, although still good looking in my opinion, you can see the cracks really starting to show. The concept is solid, but the execution feels unfinished. Some areas have flat textures, awkward lighting, and has large empty spaces to make it feel sterile instead of imposing. It should feel like a dangerous, twisted institution, but often it just feels like a rough draft of one. Overall though, Twinsanity's visuals succeed through direction rather than refinement in my opinion. The game's emphasis on skill, expressive animations, and loose presentation supports its experimental tone, helping it stand apart even when the technical execution falls short. But Engine still looks like shit though. The battleship is a purely platforming affair, although it's once again a very strong platforming segment. I never really noticed until returning to the game just how good the level design in Twinsanity actually is. This level has Crash dodging and jumping on rockets as he fights his way to the top of the battleship where Engine is waiting for him. And look man, one of the most complained about aspects of almost every Crash game in this retrospective series has consistently been the boss fights. Outside of a couple of gimmick battles, most of them boil down to running around in a circle and waiting for an opening. And that would be fine if the bosses actually aimed at you instead of pretending they're fighting Sonic the Hedgehog. You guys aren't fighting Sonic the Hedgehog, you're fighting Sonic's ass. So line up your shots and attempt to kill me. Twinsanity in particular might have the most pathetic bunch of boss fights in the series. While some of them are cool from a set piece perspective, they're almost as easy as Cortex Strikes Back, maybe even easier. Take this Engine fight. This is a character who often sports some of the better battles in the series, in our opinion. Watch our Naughty Dog boss fight tier list video for more context. But in Twinsanity, he just fires slow moving rockets at you like some scuffed Dango doll while sitting there doing nothing until he throws a TNT that destroys his own support legs. Nothing really changes except how long you're waiting for a TNT. It's boring. After a quick chase section with a chef who wants you as meat for his bum, you're thrown into yet another pathetic fucking boss fight against Brio and Tropy, and this one is probably even easier than the last. At least in that fight you could accidentally drift into the spikes in the environment because it was actively putting you to sleep. Here you're just running in circles with absolutely nothing happening. Brio just bouncing around, he might as well just be platforming with you. And Tropy literally T-poses in, breaks the ice you're standing on, and then proceeds to, say it with me, do nothing. Moving on, after we finish those guys off, we return to Cortex's laboratory, but not before accidentally triggering the humid escape section again, which once again is not a replay function, just a glitch that you can casually walk into. We finally get enough crystals, but Coco jumps out of nowhere and kicks the shit out of Cortex, probably reopening his gooch stitches. This causes the machine to malfunction, incapacitating her again. With the device broken, we now have to head to Cortex's old alma mater to get assistance from his niece of all people. And since this is all Coco's fault, she can just sit there and pout. And damage me? So I guess that makes her just as viable as the other boss fights in Twinsanity so far. You technically have to run into her to take damage.
Aboard Cortex's blimp, we run into the evil twins again. Look, I know we said earlier that we really don't have an issue with these guys, but I'll admit it, they kinda suck ass. They just randomly show up, dump a crappy enemy gauntlet on you, and then disappear to the next section of the game.
I shall crush you like the puny ones you are. You are nothing to me, for I am the great and all-powerful Neo-Cortex. You infantile vermin, how dare you mock manhandle and manipulate me? Rest assured, I will take my terrible vengeance upon...
Once again, they show off their ability to manipulate pretty much everything around them, including living beings, and I still don't get it. If the writers gave them this much power over the creatures of this dimension, why not just kill your enemy's hair? You've already taken care of what is supposed to be the strongest forces in this world, the magical mass. So what's the deal? What's the hang up with an evil scientist who's a multi-time failure and a simple-minded bandicoot that you mostly ignore anyway? Whatever, at least we get another gameplay style out of it. Albeit a brief one. We finally get to play as Cortex on his own. He can run and jump, which isn't all that important, but his main hook is the shooting. He has access to a rapid fire, a shard shot, and an AoE jumping blast, although the latter two aren't exactly more useful than just capping people with rapid fire. Don't get too excited, you can't spam with it, since it does have an ammo count to manage, though you can replenish it by simply running into ammo crates. Without ammo, Cortex quickly loses his gun fever and thus his nerve. He starts running around like the coward he is, with his only method of defending himself being shrimping and unintentionally using his giant head. A brilliant piece of detail. After that, we're just kinda dropped off at the Academy of Evil. No cutscenes, no transitions, we're just flopped here ready to snatch a child off her bed of the orders of her creepy uncle. Anyway, said creepy uncle presses a hidden switch and falls down some stairs into the boiler room. This leads into a pretty lengthy puzzle section that starts off with a fart joke.
I'm stuck! The greatest evil scientist in the world! Stuck in a pipe. How could things get any worse?
Look, they all can't be gems, okay? The only thing that saves it is the awesome performance of new voice actor Lex Lang. Oh, and speaking of the voice acting, one of the biggest changes in Twinsanity is the replacement of Cortex's previous voice actor Clancy Brown with Lex Lang. And honestly, he ends up doing most of the heavy lifting when it comes to the game's humor. With Crash being mute, the responsibility of carrying scenes almost entirely falls on Cortex, and Lang absolutely commits. His delivery is louder, more theatrical, and way more unhinged than Cortex has ever been before, which fits the game's more dialogue-heavy comedic direction. I'll always have a soft spot for Clancy Brown. I mean, he is DCAU's Lex Luthor.
The people, this is all their fault, and they're going to burn for it.
burn.
And while I'm sure he would have did just as good of a job here as he did any other time, I don't think his delivery would have worked here. That version of the character was played much more straighter, and Twinsanity needed someone who could constantly sell sarcasm, frustration, and outright humiliation without the joke wearing thin. Again, I'm sure Clancy could have did the exact same thing, but I think this change was justified because Lane's Cortex feels like he's constantly on the verge of a breakdown, which helps keep the scenes entertaining even if Crash is standing there silently trying to channel the power of nothingness. The rest of the cast follows that same exaggerated tone, and while there aren't tons of consistently voiced characters outside of the evil twins and Cortex, the few that do show up lean far harder to being goofy, which works for a game that's trying to be more overtly funny. Some performances are stronger than others, but overall the voice acting supports the fast-paced and chaotic energy of the game.
Crash, the farmer's market is tomorrow, and my wampa trees won't grow. For my orchard is riddled with greedy worms. If you rid my land of these pests, I'll give you this power crystal.
I'm an evil scientist. What do you expect? This isn't a game.
Back to the task at hand, the boiler room segment works more like a series of puzzle platforming rooms. And when I say puzzle, I don't mean anything complicated. Just spin these blue vents to line up a couple of pipes so Cortex can make it across safely while activating platforms to help us move forward. Honestly, it's one of the better ball-based puzzles I've seen in a platformer. And that's largely because once Crash starts moving the object, he soft locks onto it. After you stop moving, the object keeps going just a little bit longer and won't drift away from you unless you jump or run off. I mean, it's still annoying at times, but that's mostly because Crash feels kinda slippery to control. And I can't be asked to spin an object at something when it feels entirely too random once the game's physics are left to their own devices. But these sections are harmless overall. A couple of runs of doing that and we're off to a rematch with Dangle. And I don't know if it's just me, but the tone of the game instantly shifts from cartoonishly evil to kind of tense and unnerving. Don't worry, there's still a good joke here.
Cozy, ain't it? Rumour is you two chumps have got your mitts in some treasure. And I want a piece of that pie.
I have no idea what you just said.
But don't be mistaken, shit feels like it just got real all of a sudden. And real it's gotten because Dangle is hands down the best boss fight in the game. Spoiler alert, outside of maybe Crash 4, are the two games at the end of the Nomad era that we never played, this might be straight up the best boss fight in the series. Yeah, sure, it may not be as memorable as this fight in Warp where you had to use his on the text to break his shields, but it doesn't need to be that clever. This is the down and dirty fight, a working man's boss fight, a Statham approved boss fight if you will. That said, this is still a great alternate take on that battle. Some of the tactics are familiar, like dodging fireballs he launches into the sky, but after that, it's nothing but new stuff. He'll fire in a circle, eventually alternating between high and low shots, and unleash a wall of flames that you need to outrun. Most dangerous of all, he'll do this while sometimes tracking you or wandering off in his own direction, which you absolutely can't ignore, because he'll lock right back onto you and roast you alive if he catch you lacking. Eventually, you'll have to dodge a charge blast that you can bait into one of these targets, exposing a button that shuts off the flames around him, leaving him open to attack. The best part about the fight is that it not only addresses the issues we mentioned having with the Dangle fight in Warp, again see that video if you're interested, but it also fixes our biggest problem with Crash boss fights in general, bosses repeating the exact same loop after every health bar. Dangle does follow the same order of attacks at the start, but he never repeats the same pattern after losing a life bar, making him much harder to react to and turning this into a far more intense fight than your standard boss battle. The awesome music really helps here too. After he's dealt with, Crash takes a lift and enters the school's halls, where we get a bit more platforming with some stealth thrown in because why not? Until we reach this really cool section where you have to make it to the top of the room as acid slowly fills the area. You're constantly bouncing between avoiding enemies and moving fast enough to create platforms for yourself, all while navigating around TNTs and nitro crates. It's probably the most challenging platforming section in the game, and easily my favorite part of his area. We then gain control of Cortex for a couple of runs, clearing out enemies in the chase sequence before finally making it to Nina's room. And I gotta tell you, he's not beating those creepy Oko allegations, is he?
Soundly, Nina. And don't fear the night, with its long claws that scratch and its sharp teeth that bite. The under the covers, there's no need to hide, for your uncle's a monster, and he's on your side! Nina, my adorable young niece. My, you're getting big and sneaky. Put her there, little lady. I see they need some adjustment.
We take control of my favorite character, Nina, for a couple of minutes, and she jumps from rooftop to rooftop and wall jump using her bionic arms. Outside of the arms, she jumps just like her uncle and has a spinning attack like her cousin. And I gotta tell you, while I do enjoy Nina's character, well, what little characterization she's given anyway, she doesn't even have a voice. Her design at the very least is fantastic. The gothic schoolgirl look paired with the metal arms works incredibly well, and the lowercase N on her forehead is just awesome and adorable. Her playstyle though isn't all that different from what we've already been doing with Crash. Nina basically swaps out a double jump for a grapple hook mechanic, and it really doesn't do anything for me. There's no real skill component to it. You just jump and wait for the game to tell you what to grapple. You could replace all this with Crash and it probably would be way more entertaining. Speaking of which, she even gets a Crash style chase sequence where she has to outrun Cortex's blimp with a bus tied to it, which is funny considering it was such a simple task Cortex asked Crash to do earlier. I mostly found it irritating though, because Nina's girls just gotta have fun skipping speed. Nina eventually returns to her room and hands the sticks back to Cortex, who finish off the Academy of Evil segment with a boss fight against the school's headmistress, Madame Amberly. It's a fun little battle where you have to shoot down the organ valves that she blows open without getting trapped between them, then shoot all the flying bells coming at you to do damage to the device holding her fat ass up. It's solid. And then I guess Cortex just kills that whole ass woman, because we never see her again. The Academy of Evil section definitely has its high points, but overall the experience feels a lot weaker than the first half of the game. Outside of the boiler room level, the other two stages feel very undercooked and short. It's almost like the game itself is tapping its watch and signaling that it's time to wrap up. Did you know? Data miners have found unfinished geometry, placeholder enemies, unused voice lines, and incomplete level layouts hidden within the game's files, showing just how much content was left behind.
Did you know the game's physics engine is very fragile, allowing numerous sequence breaks, speedrunning exploits, and unintended mechanics, making it very popular in speedrunning communities?
Did you know? Design documents indicate Twinsanity was originally planned to rival the length of Crash Bandicoot: The Wrath of Cortex, but time constraints forced heavy trimming.
Did you know the engine that was used in Twinsanity was built from scratch? Travelers Till Oxford created a brand new engine specifically for Twinsanity instead of reusing tech from previous Crash titles, contributing to both its ambition and its instability.
Did you know? Early concepts included a temporary transformation where Crash and Cortex were merged into a single hybrid character with combined abilities, but it was cut due to time and complexity.
As if the game heard that little comment, Cortex suddenly remembers how the evil twins came to be what they are. A long time ago, during Cortex's days at the Academy of Evil, before he murdered his headmistress, he was just a young boy with two pet parrots named Victor and Moritz. During the experiment, an early version of what would later become the Evolvo Ray, Cortex accidentally sends his two pets, which he admits he didn't hate, to the 10th dimension. That's it. He just randomly remembers, and that's the big reveal of the evil twins' backstory.
And how I long to see them again. But be careful what you wish for, young man.
Back off, Grandpa!
For your wish will come true.
It would have been nice if you had some kind of build-up during the Academy levels that actually led to this revelation. After that, we kind of just sit in this room for a while, running around in empty space until the game remembers it was supposed to spawn us somewhere else. I think this was an unused room where Crash was placed while the last cutscene took place, and all this was meant to be hidden behind a fade out or something. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to add it to the casual glitch list because Twinsanity. We eventually returned to the Iceberg laboratory, and all Nina had to do was bop the console to get it working again, which is a pretty good payoff after going through an entire level just to scoop her up. So finally the group teleports to the 10th dimension, otherwise known as Twinsanity Island, the final area of the game. Upon getting there, fake Crash comes out of nowhere.
Evil Crash!
Sorry, evil Crash. Geez, you can tell this last section was running on fumes, huh? The evil twins come from a place with evil in front of everything, or at least I think that would have been the bit if this entire area wasn't so rushed. Back at the balcony, Cortex also lets slip that he probably had his Cortex Vortex, and Crash takes his ass again. Oh, for another Humiliskate section? Never mind. To be fair, this level has a lot more going on to it than just being purple. It's a much harder version of the first snowboarding section, with way more TNTs and nitros, and a much bigger focus on speed. It's a lot of fun, and honestly makes me wish there was still something like box totals in the game. Just something to shoot for. Same thing with the roller brawl moments. I actually find these fun, which makes it a little sad that they're mostly one-shots. Speaking of returning segments, we get another escort mission, but once again, it's a lot more harder and complex as you weave over, under, and on the same path as Cortex. After that, Evil Crash just kinda stops, and Cortex pisses off without any fanfare. We're finally here. The end of our little event Sanity? Event Sevenfold? Moving on. The final level of the game has the trio storming the Evil Twin stronghold, and it features some of the more demanding platforming sections of the game. Nothing harder than that asset section in the academy, but pretty close. The focus here is on a wide variety of platform types, disappearing platforms, ones with lasers that require you to be quick on your feet, a couple that feature ball puzzles where you have to travel across gaps, combat sections spread across multiple platforms, time sequences, and the main gimmick, these Simon Says style platforms. You have to memorize the order, and that will have you jumping over blank spots to get to the correct area. Once that gauntlet is through, we finally find all the treasure the bad guys were after. Don't question how they got to the 10th dimension or past all that platforming, they're just here. This little side plot wraps up with a cameo from Spyro the Dragon as a gag.
Oh my, I almost forgot. The treasure.
Our treasure.
Yes, we are rich.
That treasure is stolen property.
It's a little late to develop a conscience, Doctor.
Personally, I don't care, but I think he might want his gems back.
And while I wish it actually had a conclusion, the joke works fine enough. But let's wrap things up for real. Crash and company enters the Evil Twins' throne room, and why do they even need chairs if they're just gonna float above them anyway? Either Victor or Mort, so I'm not sure the story actually reveals which one is which, doesn't tell us anything we didn't already piece together. Cortex orders them back to the cage, triggering their old training, but after they snap out of it, the final boss fight begins. The final boss theme in Twinsanity is actually one of my favorite boss themes in video games. Sadly, I can't say the same for the actual fight. This is a 3-phase battle that cycles through our playable characters. First up is Nina. During her segment, she has to ignore enemy hordes while using her grappling hook to destroy these battery things, which supposedly stops the Evil Twins mech from doing something, or at least that would have been the case if I hadn't kept dying because Nina wouldn't hook on to certain prompts, until I realized you can just hold the button the entire time. Next up is Cortex, who starts out terrified until he realizes he has infinite ammo for this one. In this phase, you just outrun whatever the Evil Twins fire at you while returning fire at their weapons for entirely too long. And that's it. Lastly, Crash joins the fray in the Bandicoot mech from the beginning of the game, and his contributions is just about the same as Cortex. Just outrun whatever the twins are doing and shoot them once their shield drops or malfunctions or whatever's happening there. And that's it, the Evil Twins are defeated. I'm not sure if the Evil Twins' massive power only works outside the 10th dimension or something, but they built that mech and then refused to do anything else. I like the idea of this boss fight, and from a spectacle standpoint it's solid, but the main issue is that it doesn't really utilize any of the characters' moveset in any interesting or unique ways. Hell, Crash doesn't even get a platform phase in this fight. He just randomly shows up in his own mech. And that's cool and all, but like I already said, it's just running in a circle and shooting again. For all that, he might as well just been on foot doing the same thing and it'll be actually something different. Who cares? Ending time. The twins escape the battle and wander into Evil Crash's house, where he's been pretty peckish since he's missed 2 big-headed meals today, so the twins will have to do. Then it's heavily implied that he fucking kills them. That's a pretty dark ending for villains in the Crash Bandicoot game of all things, but I suppose Twinsanity as a whole is a little darker than your average entry. Back in their dimension, Cortex has learned a very clear lesson from his encounter with his old pets. Don't run from your mistakes. Which is fair, it's actually a good lesson for him to learn. He stopped looking for his pets and that almost came back to bite him and his island in the ass. And Crash has been a constant pet ever since Cortex evolved him. So honestly, I'm on Cortex's side with this one. Not the whole evil thing, just a lesson. Too bad for him in his attempt to get rid of Crash forever, the machine malfunctions again, and Cortex ends up inside Crash's brain where he has a full-on meltdown after finding multiple clones of the Bandicoot that immediately start styling on him to assert dominance. Well, it's Crash's brain, so at least he'll have plenty of air to try to figure things out. This is a great way to wrap a story as wacky as this up. I love it. This game FAQ review was written by Bustus in 2005. Why the heck fix something that isn't broken? When the first Crash Bandicoot game was released, I thought it was brilliant, and still do. Actually, I think it's one of the best 3D platformers ever due to its simple gameplay and many colorful levels. The next 3 Crash games, now counting Bash or the racing games, were basically the same deal, except for the warp rooms and some new features in each game. Okay, I guess. Even though I think the earliest Crash games are the best, they were all fun to play. Twinsanity, though, is a completely different story. Our hero Crash lives on Insanity Island together with his sister Coco. What they don't know is that our dare evil scientist Cortex is also on the island and he's planning to defeat Crash once and for all. After paralyzing Coco, he dresses up as her, which looks very funny indeed, and lures Crash into a trap. But once again, Crash wins, and they both fall into a cave, where Cortex finds a power crystal. The very unlikely duo must cooperate to escape the cavern. On the outside, they meet 2 space birds whose identity I will not reveal. These are the main villains of Crash Twinsanity. Sounds good, eh? The problem lies not in the story, but in the other categories. Here goes. Story, 7 out of 10. Good enough. It's a little more interesting than the earlier games, which is a plus. Not perfect, but not bad either. Some twists would have been good though, and it seems a little too random at times.
I actually agree here, although I give the story around a 5 out of 10, and that mainly comes from how boring the main antagonists are, the evil twins. Crash has never really had an issue with bad guys, and yeah, it's mostly Cortex a lot of the time, but there's something to be said when this series uses the same villains back to back, and people never got bored. The twins are just not that interesting. Like was said earlier, I don't hate them in concept, and I believe they're solid. 2 pet birds flung into another dimension because of the younger Cortex, then coming back as seemingly all-powerful mutants to exact revenge is a good idea, mainly for a Cortex-focused villain, while still making them overall a threat that brings in our heroes. It works. I just have 2 major issues with the characters. The first one is we don't know a lot about them, and the other is they're evil for the sake of being evil, and that's just boring. Even if you wanted them just to be that, I think there are ways you can do it while still making them entertaining to watch. They even have enough wiggle room to work in a more sympathetic role, and that would have been very unique for a Crash story villain. In the end, they just pop up, taunt Crash and Cortex for a while, and drop enemies until they actually have to face them for real. I'm sure they're a result of rushed development, but they are what we got at the end of the day. The rest of the plot is fine. I don't really have a lot of issues with the actual progression of it, but for me, having a weak villain can really bring a story down.
Graphics, 4 out of 10. It's not that the graphics themselves are bad, in fact they are sorta good. The problem here is the huge amount of graphical glitches and bad animations. The cutscenes range from fair to absolutely horrible, and you'll more than often notice objects that aren't supposed to be there at all. Talking about the cutscenes, there are annoyingly many cutscenes in the game, and the only ones you can skip are the very few ones that are actually interesting.
Upon replaying Twinsanity, I think the graphics are fantastic, some hiccups notwithstanding. While I still say C&K is the overall better looking game, that's only because it's a much smaller spinoff. Twinsanity is a far larger game, and taking that into consideration, it looks a lot better than I remember. And I don't really understand where the complaints about the bad animations are coming from. It animates just fine. Sure, you'll get the occasional character popping in or sliding into place when certain cutscenes are triggered and the like, but that's due to the game's lack of polish. The animations themselves are absolutely fine. Cortex alone has so many great facial animations. Yeah, it's not the best looking game in the series, but I think it's a little more than just sorta good. I can't really speak on the unskippable cutscenes. It's annoying, but it didn't bother me that much. Then again, I only died less than a handful of times.
Sound, 9 out of 10. This is, in my opinion, the category where Twinsanity scores best, especially due to the fantastic voice acting for Cortex. The others are not as good as his, but still good and enjoyable. The other sounds are your everyday smack, bangs, and booms that fit into a platformer.
We already went on about the good voice acting, especially Lane's contribution, but are the sound effects in Twinsanity actually good? While there are a bunch of generic sounds, there's nothing really that stands out. Hell, due to the game's unfinished nature, there are sound effects that are straight up missing. A lot, actually.
Music, 1 out of 10. The horror. This is the nearly worst game music I've ever heard, period. Only games that will score lower here are some NES games, but they couldn't have made much better music, so they're excused. To use this terrible piece of crap as game music though is inexcusable. I seriously don't know how to describe it. Just find a way to download the music or something if you want to know what I mean.
While I can understand that the music of Twinsanity can be and is very polarizing, I still think dubbing it the worst music I've ever heard is landing on a bit thick, right? You hate the entire soundtrack, all of it. Not one piece of music in this game is even the slightest bit amusing to you? I mean, let us know in the comments if you share this opinion, but I get someone not liking the music. That said, there is good sounding music in this game. Is it just me? I hate that the soundtrack is this way, because it's one of those reasonable arguments you can't really challenge. If people generally don't vibe with the music, I can't call them out on that. I can see their point. Maybe not to the extreme this person is taking it, but I still wish I could have explained themselves a little more here. But still, whatever, I like it.
Controls, 4 out of 10. I've always thought that the Crash Bandicoot controls were top notch. This changed completely in Twinsanity due to the fully 3D movement. This makes it necessary to include a certain feature called camera. Sure, there are no camera issues when running through straightforward caves and such, but in certain places, the camera can be totally messed up. The other controls are basically the same, except they made some moves worse, like the slide jump. Instead of giving you some extra jump height, it makes you do a long forward jump with absolutely no control. In short, this category could have been so much better.
Yes, I've too heard of this rare feature called the camera. I agree with a lot here. The camera is mostly fine. It does have the tendency to go a bit haywire from time to time, but in my experience, that was far and few between. It wasn't mentioned, but Crash and the other playable characters control fine. Maybe a little too slippery for Crash when you're trying to manipulate objects, but nothing uncontrollable. I 1000% agree with the slide jump. The fucking slide jump.
Gameplay, 1 out of 10. Man, this is just screwed. There are 16 levels in all, and since 4 of them are mere hub levels, you can't really say there are more than 12. Not a lot, eh? To compensate for this, some of these 12 real levels are painfully long and boring. Not hard at all, just way too long. I'm sick and tired of the stupid idea of having a must-go-through tutorial, especially when the game can be completed in 3 to 5 hours, not counting the high amount of unskippable cutscenes. Of course, there are secrets spread around the levels also, even in the hubs. In each level, there are 6 diamonds that unlocks different things when collected. Artwork, movies, cartoons, that sort of stuff. Some of these are way too obvious, while others are extremely annoying. I won't forget about one in the 3rd level that if you miss it, you'll have to complete the whole level, go through the 1st and 2nd level again, and then try to get it one more time. Yay! Controlling Cortex is incredibly boring. Controlling Nina is almost fun, just too bad you get to control her 1.5 times. Controlling Crash and Cortex together is boring too. The only really interesting type of level is snowboarding, especially the 2nd one. Even the music isn't as bad as it usually is. Other than that, you're just running from place to place, wiping all bosses on the way. Speaking of which, only one of 8 bosses are challenging. And no, it's not the last boss.
I'll withhold our opinions on how the level design was ultimately handled, because we're going to be wrapping up the video soon with our thoughts, and it's part of that conclusion. But this just come off as someone who didn't vibe with the change of gameplay philosophy, and that's fine, but it doesn't have to make it bad. Would the game be any better if Twinsanity have kept the level-based structure from the previous entries? I don't think so, especially if it had the same development issues. It'd probably be even more hated, because instead of being in its own lane, it would just end up being compared to the Naughty Dog games, like the Wrath of Cortex. I really wish I could go into this more, but the conclusion comes right after this section, and I don't want to repeat the points made here. Just keep this particular part of the review in mind when the topic of level design comes up.
Replayability. Drop the score thing for some reason. Bigger than you'd expect, actually. This game is so short, you'll probably play it again just because you have to kill more time.
What? Man, this game doesn't have any replay value. I guess you could collect the remaining gems for completion's sake, but that pales in comparison to what was offered before. Once you've seen what the game had to offer, there's not much reason to go back. There aren't really any systems in place that reward replaying levels or mastering them, so outside of collecting what you miss, it's pretty much a one and done experience.
So is Twinsanity a good game? Yeah, absolutely so. We had just as much fun playing it now as we did years ago. That's not to say things here are completely flawless and we randomly don't understand why the game gets all the hate it does in certain circles, just that it doesn't bother us that much compared to others. However, we'd be fools not to factor in those things, so let's talk about it for a little bit. There's no denying that Twinsanity is an incomplete game rushed out the door for a plethora of reasons, and this has caused a ton of issues. Chief among them are drop story beats that made me forget the evil twins are even the main antagonists of the plot. The middle of the game, outside of the literal last stage, feel an extremely fast track to get players to the end, and the glitches, although none of which we encountered were game breaking, they still showed up a lot more than I would have liked. I don't want to focus too much on these because they're unavoidable parts of what Twinsanity is in the modern day. There are no patches coming to fix the game outside of a full-on remaster, so I want to focus on Twinsanity as a Crash game itself. And on that front, while the game is enjoyable and intentionally designed just to be different, things could have been tightened up to bring it more in line with the rest of the mainline games, of which Twinsanity is one. A good example of this is the lack of box totals or any meaningful incentive tied to breaking them. Breaking boxes has always been a very satisfying and important part of Crash's replay value, and in Twinsanity, they don't mean very much, with most boxes just being life crates that players end up ignoring after a while. And while the gems themselves are fun to collect thanks to their optional challenges, some of which are genuinely among the best platforming segments in the game, with the devs even going as far as to weaken Uka Uka's protection from nitro crates just so you can't cheese through them, the rewards just aren't very motivating. Unlocking concept art is neat, but it's the kind of thing that can easily be looked up on YouTube, which makes the effort feel a little less worthwhile. These regrettably end up getting ignored by us as well, which is unfortunate. I enjoyed the level design a good deal and was kind of taken aback by how well designed most of the levels are, and that's while not even considering that Crash doesn't even get additional moves. But speaking of that, where are the power-ups? Yeah, I get it, largely unfinished game, but still. For how crappy these bosses are, receiving a new ability after defeating them here and there would have lessened the blow a little bit. But even if we're just pushing the power-ups aside, Crash's basic moveset leaves a lot to be desired as well. The belly flop quickly loses relevance in favor to just stepping on buttons, and Crash's long jump is neither long or barely a jump for that matter. It's pretty fucking pathetic. And don't get me started on the slide, with the only enemy that actually loses to it being in the tutorial section. As what was said earlier, the game's breakneck pacing doesn't help when looking at everything more critically. Some of the extra gameplay moments do come up more than once, yes, but others, such as the roller brawl or playing levels as Nita Cortex, are only used once. Others seem like they're just thrown into levels because the devs suddenly remembered they're there. I still stand by the point that the overall handling of these mechanics is largely fine when considering the game as a whole though. At the same time, while I get the ambition, Twinsanity would have really benefited from the devs dialing back on a couple of these ideas to properly polish a few of them out. Not like the game didn't need it. With all that being said, does Twinsanity accomplish the mission of creating a long connected Crash adventure? Yeah. And despite my many complaints, I go as far as to say that it does it pretty damn solidly. Not perfect to any stretch of the imagination, but just solid. I think Twinsanity is one of those rare games that's a little overrated and a little overhated. While I can empathize with the fact that the game actually tries to do something different, and after a bit of in-house trouble, Traveler's Tales had to throw something together, and it could have been much worse, that doesn't mean the faults of the game can just be brushed aside, as this is the product we got at the end of the day. I guess if you're one of the very few who haven't given this a try yet, it's technically free and you can't beat that. But more importantly, you'll have to largely be okay with the idea that what made Crash Bandicoot what it was has admittedly been watered down here and replaced with a strange, comedy-focused Rayman 2 style game. I can't speak for all of y'all, but we here at Nostalgia-tards like this little crack gem enough to call it good. Man, we're once again crashed out for a while. We'll finish the rest of Crash's Nomad era later this year, which includes 2 titles that we've never touched before, so that'll be fun. I hope you like, comment, and subscribe and decide to hang out with us until then, because we've got a good amount of totally different games to talk about coming next. We'll see you next time on Nostalgia-tards.
Nostalgia-tards.
All right.